For 2,000 years, Christians have asked the same question. Why has Jesus delayed his coming? But what if he never did? What if this so-called delay isn't a biblical truth at all, but a theological patch, something invented long after Jesus and his apostles had spoken? This is the story of the doctrine of the delay of the Parousia, where it came from, how it spread, and why the full preterist view offers a more biblically consistent answer. The idea that Jesus delayed his return didn't originate in Scripture. It was born in the late 19th century, a time when theologians started reading the New Testament through a new, critical lens. It began in earnest with Johannes Weiss in 1892. He argued that Jesus was a Jewish apocalyptic prophet who expected God's kingdom to arrive in his own lifetime. When that didn't happen, Weiss claimed, the early church had to adjust its theology to explain the failure. This idea gained huge traction with Albert Schweitzer in his 1906 book, The Quest of the Historical Jesus. Schweitzer essentially concluded that Jesus expected the end to come imminently, died before it happened, and his followers had to theologically reinterpret his failed prediction. Fast forward to the 1950s, and you have Hans Conzelmann, who argued that Luke's gospel was specifically written to account for this delay. He proposed that Luke restructured salvation history into three distinct eras: the time of Israel, the time of Jesus, and a new extended age, the time of the church, which was created to fill the gap before the delayed return. Scholars like Rudolf Bultmann and Oscar Cullmann further cemented this idea. Bultmann with his existential approach, and Cullmann with his famous already not yet framework, both built upon the assumption of a delay. These weren't just academic debates. These theories flowed directly into modern theology and seminaries. They became the foundation for how countless pastors and teachers were trained to read the New Testament. The delay wasn't just a theory anymore. It was becoming a fundamental assumption of modern Christianity. And today, the doctrine of delay is everywhere, often preached unconsciously from the pulpit. Teachers like John Hagee, Joseph Prince, William Lane Craig, Thomas Ice, and even organizations like the Bible Project frequently speak of Jesus' return as still future. By doing so, they are effectively assuming a 2,000-year delay. The message we hear over and over is, Jesus said he would come soon, but God's time is different from ours. The go-to verse for this is 2 Peter 3:8-9. With the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day. But was Peter giving a license to ignore clear time statements? Or was he offering comfort to first-century believers, assuring them that God's promise would come exactly on schedule, not justifying centuries of postponement? When you trace it back, this modern popularization of the delay doctrine is the direct theological descendant of Weiss, Schweitzer, and Conzelmann. It's not apostolic teaching. It's an inherited academic tradition that has trickled down to the pews. So if that's the tradition, what does the Bible actually say? The scriptures themselves speak with stunning clarity and urgency. Hebrews 10:37 says, "For yet a little while, and he who is coming will come and will not delay." It explicitly denies a delay. In Matthew 24:34, Jesus promises, "This generation will not pass away until all these things take place." Just a few chapters earlier, in Matthew 16:27-28, he tells his disciples that some of them standing right there would not taste death before seeing the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The book of Revelation opens with the same immediacy. Revelation 1:1 promises to show things which must shortly take place. And the book ends with Jesus himself declaring 3 times, "Behold, I am coming quickly." In 1 Thessalonians 4:15, Paul includes himself with his audience when he says, "We who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord." Each of these texts was written to a real first-century audience. The time statements were meant to be understood by them, in their context, not endlessly reinterpreted for thousands of years. The Bible doesn't teach a delay. It denies one. This brings us to the preterist response. The full preterist view simply takes Jesus at his word. It holds that the Parousia, his coming in judgment and glory to establish his kingdom, was fulfilled in AD 70. This event coincided with the destruction of Jerusalem and the Temple, which marked the definitive end of the Old Covenant age. This isn't some new, radical invention. Early church historian Eusebius, writing in the 4th century, documented how Christians fled to Pella before Jerusalem fell, and he explicitly interpreted the city's destruction as a fulfillment of Jesus' Olivet prophecy. Athanasius, another church father, spoke of the kingdom as something already established, not as something delayed. In the modern era, scholars like J. Stuart Russell in his 1878 work, The Parousia, and Max King in the 20th century began to build systematic preterist frameworks. They demonstrated how every New Testament time statement is internally consistent when you understand its first-century fulfillment. Today, a growing number of teachers are defending and expanding on this view. Dr. Don K. Preston, pointing out that "at hand" means exactly that, not 2,000 years away. Ed Stevens, highlighting the consistent imminence of every New Testament text. The late Max King, who developed covenant eschatology, showing the systemic fulfillment of eschatological passages. William Bell is showing the consistency of these time texts across all of the New Testament. Pastor David B. Curtis emphasizes audience relevance and grammatical precision. Michael Miano champions the practical, real-world impact of fulfilled eschatology for the church today. Guys like Travis Drum and Zach Davis are engaging with contemporary scholarship and applying preterism in pastoral settings. Even N.T. Wright, who isn't a full preterist, has argued persuasively that much of Matthew 24 and its parallel passages were fulfilled in the first century. He provides a critical bridge between mainstream scholarship and the preterist interpretation. And then there are teachers like Steve Magua, who are working to communicate these truths to a modern audience, exposing the scholarly roots of the delay doctrine and pointing believers back to what the scripture actually says. Full preterism doesn't need theological gymnastics to explain away a delay. It removes the need for a delay entirely by taking Jesus' words at face value in their historical and biblical context. So, let's bring it all together. The doctrine of the delay of the Parousia wasn't born in the pages of Scripture. It was born in the pages of 19th and 20th century scholarship. It spread through respected seminaries and popular pulpits, becoming so normalized that most believers today simply assume it's true without ever questioning it. But the Bible itself says, "He who is coming will come and will not delay." Jesus promised to return within the lifetime of his hearers, and he did. The Parousia wasn't delayed. Our understanding of it was. It's time we lay aside the traditions of men and let Scripture speak for itself. The kingdom has come, the promises were fulfilled, and the glory of Christ's finished work is far greater than any delayed hope. Thank you for watching. If this video challenged you or helped you see the Scriptures in a new light, please like, share, and subscribe to join us as we explore more biblical truths.